What happens when families of hate crime victims beg Washington for protection, but leaders answer with silence and budget cuts? That's exactly what played out in a heated hearing where Congresswoman Meng confronted Attorney General Pam Bondi over the dismantling of America's most important hate crime prevention programs. Survivors and family members of Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., Matthew Shepard, and victims of the Pittsburgh Synagogue Massacre had signed a powerful letter pleading to save these grants. But instead of answers, what they got was deflection, excuses, and even an offer of a personal cell phone number, as if national policy could be patched up in a private call.
Madam Attorney General, I wanted to ask about a topic that's of great importance to many Americans and especially my constituents, which is about hate crimes. I'm really troubled that your budget proposes to end the grant programs that may help prevent some of these hate crimes. As you may know, I was the author of one of these programs, the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice program, which was created in fiscal year 2022. This program supported local groups working to increase hate crimes reporting, give community members resources in languages other than English, and to improve relationships between local law enforcement and the community. It was a direct response to the rise in hate crimes targeting Asian Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. You may recall in March 2021, 6 women of Asian descent were tragically murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. My Hate Crimes Act passed through Congress in May of that year with bipartisan support, including from several of my colleagues on the other side of the dais. For years, I've been hearing from constituents about how scared they felt and have been hearing from members of these communities as well as experts who've told me that one of the best ways to combat hate in this country is to fund prevention programs. So not just prosecution, but also prevention. I have a letter here that hate crime survivors and family members wrote to you in May, expressing their strongest concerns about the termination of these grants. Signed by people like family members of Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., Matthew Shepard, and survivors of the Pittsburgh Synagogue shooting. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the hearing record this letter from these survivors and family members to Attorney General Bondi regarding the termination of hate crimes related grant programs.
Without objection.
Oh, yes, without objection.
Thank you, Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, I absolutely share your support for our law enforcement and for the prosecution of hate crimes in a just way, but we must combat all forms of hate on all fronts, bringing together law enforcement and community leaders and members of the public. And these grant programs have helped many communities do exactly this. So I just wanted to ask and hear from you why there is a proposal to eliminate the 3 largest sources of DOJ funding for hate crime prevention programs.
Yeah, and Ranking Member, can you list those 3 for me again? And I'm sorry, I have not received your letter yet, but I would welcome working with you on any issue regarding hate crimes in the Asian American community, in any community. I welcome working with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I would love to. And this letter was sent May 15th, and we'll make sure that you and your team have received it. So the programs, one of them, for example, is named the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice. 3 programs have been cut, and one of these programs literally help support our law enforcement departments locally, like our NYPD, to train and respond to hate crimes.
Let me see. So we have 5,800 grants, Chairman, that come, Ranking Member, excuse me, that come through my office. 365 have been cut so far. That's approximately 6%. What I will tell you is we have turned back on 13 of those so far because people have reached out to me. If you want to reach out and talk to me directly, I will give you my cell phone. I would love to sit down with you and see if we can work that out. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with those 3 directly. But again, we will, if you have on either side of the aisle any grants that you believe should be back on, I would love to meet with you and work with you on that. We're doing that on a case-by-case basis, and law enforcement is my top priority, especially hate crimes, violence against women, everything I've done my entire career as a prosecutor. I think we have a former prosecutor in the room too. And I look forward to working with you on this and seeing what we can do to help you.
Great, we'd love to work together, and we will flag all the programs that have been impacted, including those that directly support our local law enforcement like NYPD. And just to be more specific, the 3 programs mentioned are community-based approaches, Jabara Hire, No Hate, and Shepherd Bird, No Hate Shepherd Bird. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez.
This wasn't just political theater. It was a stark reminder that when prevention is abandoned, entire communities are left at risk. The hearing wasn't supposed to be a spectacle, but the moment Meng took the microphone, it became clear this wasn't just another back and forth over budget lines. This was about whether the government would stand with communities living in fear or quietly cut the very tools designed to protect them. Meng showed up prepared, precise, and deeply personal, while Bondi appeared evasive, unprepared, and shockingly dismissive. It wasn't 2 people debating policy. It was a collision between urgency and indifference, between those demanding accountability and those pretending a phone call could solve it. Meng didn't waste a second. She zeroed in on the administration's decision to slash Department of Justice funding for hate crime prevention. She reminded everyone that she had authored the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice program in 2022, a program created in response to the terrifying surge of anti-Asian violence during the pandemic. This wasn't abstract. It was rooted in real fear, real attacks, and real loss. She recalled the 2021 Atlanta spa shootings, where 6 women of Asian descent were murdered, tying that tragedy to a much longer and darker history of hate-fueled violence in America. Names like Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., and Matthew Shepard weren't statistics. They were haunting reminders of what happens when hate is left unchecked. Each name carried weight, underscoring a simple but painful truth: prevention isn't optional, it's essential. She then dropped a document into the record that made the stakes undeniable: a letter signed by survivors and family members of hate crime victims. These weren't politicians or lobbyists. These were people who had lost loved ones to violence born of prejudice. Their voices called out from the page, urging the government not to abandon them. Imagine being in that chamber, hearing Meng read those names aloud, invoking the memories of those lost, and then asking why the Justice Department would even consider defunding prevention programs. The silence that followed was deafening. And then Bondi spoke. What should have been an opportunity to provide clarity or justification turned into a masterclass in evasion. She admitted she hadn't even read the survivor's letter. She couldn't recall the names of the very programs being cut, asking Meng to repeat them as though they were obscure details rather than nationally recognized grant initiatives. When pressed, she leaned on vague statistics. Only 6% of grants had been cut, she said, and 13 had been reinstated. But those numbers did nothing to answer the central question: why were the most impactful hate crime prevention programs being dismantled? Instead of an explanation, she offered her personal cell phone number, suggesting that anyone concerned could just call her directly. It was almost surreal, as if the rollback of a national strategy to combat hate crimes could be solved with a friendly chat. To understand why this matters, you have to know what those programs actually did. The Jabara Hire No Hate Act, named after Khalid Jabara and Heather Heyer, was designed to improve hate crime reporting and expand resources for victims. The Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. grants supported education, training, and community partnerships to prevent hate crimes before they escalated. The Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice program gave local groups multilingual tools, helped victims navigate the system, and rebuilt broken trust between law enforcement and vulnerable communities. These weren't extras in the budget. They were lifelines created in direct response to real crises. Cutting them doesn't just trim spending, it pulls away the foundation that communities rely on to feel safe. Bondi's inability or unwillingness to defend these cuts spoke volumes. This wasn't about fiscal prudence. It was about shifting values, about choosing to let prevention slip quietly off the agenda. Critics argue that by downplaying the importance of these programs, her office was signaling that certain communities didn't rank high enough on the priority list. Whether by design or by neglect, the outcome is the same. People already living in fear are left even more vulnerable. What made the contrast even sharper was Meng's approach. She wasn't there to grandstand or score political points. She repeatedly praised law enforcement, emphasized bipartisan support for the grants, and even extended multiple invitations to work together. She reminded the chamber that the original Hate Crimes Act passed with backing from both parties. This wasn't about left versus right. It was about people versus politics. Her tone was urgent but respectful, moral but pragmatic. She wasn't just demanding answers, she was offering solutions, and yet the response she got from Bondi was symbolic outreach with zero substance. A phone number instead of a plan, statistics instead of commitments, platitudes instead of leadership. It wasn't just unconvincing, it was insulting. Survivors and grieving families don't need a hotline to a politician's voicemail. They need to know that the government values their safety enough to invest in it. By reducing the issue to a matter of percentages and personal calls, Bondi revealed not only a lack of preparation, but a lack of seriousness. The bigger picture here is chilling. These prevention programs were developed because hate crimes were skyrocketing. They represented a direct response to a national crisis. Now, without public debate, they're being dismantled. That silence is dangerous. When government officials claim to care about hate crimes while simultaneously defunding the very programs meant to fight them, the message is unmistakable. Prevention isn't a priority, and that tells vulnerable communities exactly where they stand on the margins: unprotected, expendable. This hearing wasn't just about grants, it was about trust. Trust between communities and law enforcement. Trust between survivors and the government that promised to protect them. And trust between citizens and leaders who are supposed to value their lives equally. Every evasive answer, every shrug, every attempt to minimize the issue chipped away at that trust. By the end, it wasn't just about the programs that had been cut, it was about a deeper failure of leadership. Meng's performance showed what leadership looks like when it's rooted in responsibility. She carried the weight of her constituents' fear, the history of hate-based violence in America, and the voices of survivors who demanded to be heard. Bondi's performance, on the other hand, showed what happens when leadership becomes about optics, rather than outcomes. Offering a phone number in place of a plan is not empathy, it's gaslighting. It's a way of pretending to care without taking any real risk or responsibility. So what's the takeaway? This wasn't just another tense exchange on Capitol Hill. It was a reminder of how easily real people can be sidelined when political convenience comes first. Grace Meng came armed with facts, bipartisan backing, and the voices of survivors. Pam Bondi came with deflection, vagueness, and a phone number. That contrast speaks louder than any statistic. Because in the end, this isn't about paperwork, it's about lives. Survivors in vulnerable communities don't need excuses, they need protection. And if hate crime prevention is even up for debate, then we all need to ask whose safety really matters. Public spin won't stop hate, silence won't save lives, and ignoring the pleas of survivors will not make the problem disappear. So comment below, should hate crime prevention programs ever be cut? Let your voice be heard, share this video, like, subscribe, and remember, stay sharp, stay loud, and never mistake silence for peace. This fight is just getting started.